All right, welcome guys. Hopefully you can hear me well. We're going to continue our notes on westward expansion, and again, all of this is building up towards the Civil War. Right? It's all about tensions, rivalries that keep building up between the North and the South. Okay, so last week we did, or actually a few days ago after our test, we did part one of the westward expansion slides. Now we're doing part two. Okay, and on your class page, you'll see the open note quiz on these slides, right? Just these ones, right? So take some notes, write down the things that are in bold, right? In black bold or underlined, write them down, save them, use them for your open note quiz, but also save them, right? To study for the final, okay? Let's get started. Okay, again, it's all about building tension, right, between the North and the South, right? That eventually leads to the Civil War, but there's specific events, specific things that happen that inch us closer to the Civil War. So let's take a look. First of all, right, a few days ago, we talked about the Mexican-American War. Right? The United States won, defeated Mexico. Now it's taken over the entire Southwest. Right? The land that used to belong to Spain then belonged to Mexico because Mexico got independent from Spain. Now, after the Mexican-American War, belongs to the United States. All right, so now it has a lot of land. The question is, what is going to happen with that land? Right? Is that land going to be made into more slave states like the South, or more free states like the North? Right? You can imagine the South wants more slave states, the North wants more free states. That's the major question. It's a tension though, and that pushes us towards civil war. Okay, so that's one of the major impacts of the Mexican-American War, what to do with this new land. So the North is becoming more northern, if that makes sense. Right? The South becomes more southern, right? More fervent in what they believe in. Right? That's sectionalism. Right? Two different cultures in the United States, the northern culture and the southern culture. Right? So the country is divided, not just politically, right, but culturally. Right? And that sectionalism is going to reach a breaking point once we get to the Civil War, right? So, Mexican-American War, right, very, very much impacts the United States even after the war, okay? That's the key thing to get away from this, right? So, one of the first instances of sectionalism, right, the continued strong divide between North and South. Okay, first we have the Missouri Compromise, right? This is earlier, right? We're reaching back to see the roots of this, right? So first, the Missouri Compromise in 1820. You'll see there on the map the line there above the Arkansas Territory at 3630. That's the Missouri Compromise line, right? And the whole point of this compromise is to make sure that for every new state that gets created after this, after 1820, doesn't matter which state becomes which, right? But there always has to be an equal number of free states and an equal number of slave states, right? That's the Missouri Compromise, okay? And it essentially says that anything above the Missouri Compromise line, right, that's territory that later becomes a state, has to become a free state. Anything below it has to become a slave state. Right? That's the compromise, to keep the balance in equal number of both kinds of states. Right? But there's going to be disagreements later on. The rule isn't always going to apply. People are going to try to challenge this compromise, challenge this rule, and it's going to keep inching us towards the Civil War, right, where sectionalism is going to explode into a massive war. Okay, but the first up, we got Missouri Compromise. Another thing that leads to rising sectionalism, right? We kind of talked about this already, the Mexican-American War, and it continues and continues a rise in sectionalism, right? Because the North and the South are going to continue to become even more different, right? Especially because the North has this conspiracy that the Mexican-American War was just a Southern conspiracy to create more slave states, right? That the South wanted this war with Mexico to then get that land and transform that land into more slave states. Right? There's no proof about that, but that's the way it was viewed. Right? That's how the North viewed it. Right? So again, all this is building up more sectionalism, eventually civil war. Right? We're getting closer to it. That's the whole point. Then this was also in our slides last time, a few days ago, right? The Wilmot Proviso Bill, the Wilmot Proviso Proposal. And essentially, this is the bill, right, that proposed making all of the land won from Mexico in the Mexican-American War free, right? Meaning making all of it into free states. The South obviously is never going to let this happen, right? And congressmen from the South block this bill from becoming a law. But now the South is threatened, right? The South is threatened by the North and the things that they're trying to do, like they tried to do with Wilmot Proviso, right? Again, sectionalism, South and the North are becoming increasingly divided and just different, right? And all that leads to the Civil War. Then you have the issue with popular sovereignty, right? What to do with this new land won from Mexico? Well, some people are going to say, well, apply the idea of popular sovereignty. The people there, right? The people there get to choose whether or not they want slavery or if they don't, right? That's popular sovereignty, right? Letting the people rule, letting the people decide whether or not they want to be a free state or they want to be a slave state, right? Obviously, they're only asking American white citizens, right? They're not asking black slaves about this, right? Because then obviously those people would vote against being a slave state. But essentially, that's what popular sovereignty is. Because the belief is that the government should step in and tell you what to do, right? And tell you what to be or who to be, right? Unfortunately, right, some people say that, well, yes, that's good, but you don't get to choose over whether or not there is slavery. You can choose for other things, right, but not for this issue. Right? So it's going to be a possible solution, but people get very angry over it, right? There's a massive kind of like little tiny civil war that happens in Kansas, right, called Bleeding Kansas, where the people fight each other over this issue. And we get a new political party, a new American political party is formed, right, called the Free Soil Party. Now, this is technically an anti-slavery party, right? But make sure you read those slides very carefully, read those notes. This party did not want slavery to expand west, meaning they didn't want the land won from Mexico to become slave states. The key thing here, though, to keep in mind is that they were not against the institution of slavery itself, right? So meaning basically, you'll see there that third bullet point, right? They wanted to keep the West, right, the Western United States, the new land won from Mexico, they wanted to keep that land for whites. They didn't want them to compete for jobs with slaves, right? Because if you have slavery there, you have a free workforce. You don't need to hire workers to work. You have slaves. This party did not want that. It wanted work for people who are workers, not slaves. So again, the Free Soil Party, technically against slavery, but also in reality, not against it, right? Not against slavery itself. That's important to notice the difference in that, okay? And while all this is happening, you got thousands of people going out west looking for gold, especially in California, right? Because after 1848, right, people are realizing that there's tons of gold to be found in California. In gold mines, people are leaving everything behind, right, to see if they can get lucky enough to find gold and to get rich, right, almost instantaneously. And you have the famous 49ers, obviously, trying to make a fortune going to California. But remember, the key thing is this is bringing more and more white Americans into the West. New towns are being created. New cities are being created, right? You're going to get the creation of boom towns everywhere. Wherever new miners go in California, you're going to get boom towns. And eventually, those boom towns will become actual permanent towns, okay? And that's all because of the California gold rush, right? Why is there so many people in California today? Well, this is one of the first reasons, right? There was already a ton of people there by 1849, but this brings in thousands and thousands more, right, trying to find gold. And not a lot of people know this, right? It's not just white Americans who are coming in here, who are 49ers, who are going to find gold. You're going to get a ton of Asian immigrants who are going to look for gold. Right? They're going to work on the railroads. They're going to help build and grow these boom towns. But a lot of these Asian immigrants are going to face something that is called nativism. And we'll talk later on about what that is. What is nativism? Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, but for now, write down that bold bullet point, write it down, put it in your notes, right? A lot of 49ers were Asian immigrants, mostly from China, right? Mostly from China. California, right? We just talked about how thousands and thousands of people are migrating into California trying to find gold. Some are just going to start a new life, right? Ranching, farming, whatever it may be. The fact is, California is increasing its population very fast, right? There's a lot of people there, right? And now people are requesting it that it become a state, an official state, right? But the thing is, the people are requesting California to be a free state, meaning no slavery allowed, right? That's going to make the South angry. And California is a big state. It's going to be big, right? A lot of people. The South doesn't want a big populous state to become a free state. Right? So this is, again, going to continue this sectionalism between the North and between the South. California wants to be a free state. Okay, that's going to cause a major issue. So whenever there's a major issue between the North and the South, in order to try to solve things, to try to make sure that a war doesn't happen, right? Obviously, we know a war does happen, right? But there's going to be attempts to try to lower the tension, right? Lowering sectionalism. And one of them is the Compromise of 1850, right? You'll see there from the bullet points, right? This determined the status of the land from the Mexican cession, meaning the land won from Mexico when America won the Mexican-American War. The Compromise of 1850 is going to tell us, okay, what is that going to do to the status of the land finally, right? To make sure that the South is happy and to make sure the North is happy. All right, so let's take a look. The terms. One thing, the main thing that the North gets out of the Compromise of 1850, California becomes a free state. Now, that's huge. Right now, the North and the free states have a new, massive, large state that is also a free state. That's going to be big. Right? That's a big win, right, in the Compromise of 1850 for the North. Okay. The South, however, they're not a loser from their perspective through the Compromise of 1850. Right? You'll see their bullet point number 3. The South received a stronger Fugitive Slave Act to catch runaways in the North. And I remember the movie 12 Years a Slave. I remember Southern people disguised themselves, went to the north and kidnapped, right, free people, free blacks, and made them into slaves. Now, right, if there was a slave, let's say in Louisiana, who escaped, made its way to New York, right, in a free state, now the southern plantation owners could go up to New York, chase after them all the way up to New York, where they were supposed to be technically free now. They could go there, catch them, and bring them back. Right? That's a huge change. That's a massive change for the South and for the plantation system now. Because now it used to be where slaves just went to the North and then they were free. Now their former masters can go up there, and if they find them, they are allowed to legally bring them back. Right? That's a massive change. So the South is happy about this. It's a horrible thing, but the South is happy about this, even though the North got California. So that's the compromise of 1850 there. Okay, so that's lowering the tension between the North and the South here. Right? Obviously, it's not going to stay that way for long, right? It's not. Right? The Civil War still happens. Okay, and there you see, right, what the Fugitive Slave Act entailed, right? People could go up there, recapture their slaves. But remember, though, this was a law. This was a legal law, right? So if you were in the North, or you were in New York, and you knew a slave was hiding, you had to technically tell the police that a slave was hiding there, and you had to help the former master get his slaves back. Legally, you were legally obliged to do this, right? It's a horrible, horrible thing. Right? You can see there from the cartoon, right, what it entailed, catching runaway slaves. The good thing about the Fugitive Slave Act is it's going to make many Northerners who had been indifferent, who didn't care about the issue of slavery, many of those people are now going to realize how horrible the slave system is, right? Because they're going to see in the middle of their streets in New York and Chicago, wherever, they're going to see slaves being caught and being brought back to the South. Right? They're going to see firsthand with their own eyes the horrors of slavery. Many of them who had been indifferent, who didn't used to care about this issue, many of them now are going to hate. They're going to start campaigning against slavery, right? So that's going to be a big Northern reaction to the Fugitive Slave Act, which is good, right? Which is good. And then in 1852, you're going to get a very, very influential book, right, written by Harriet Beecher. Right there you have a picture of her there, a woman, right, a very famous woman, who publishes a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And this is an anti-slavery book, meaning it was created with the sole purpose of convincing people that slavery is horrible, that it should not be allowed, right? And she wrote about the graphic things that happened on plantations and in slavery in general, right? Think back from the movie we watched, right? 12 Years a Slave. You remember the horrible things that were happening there, right? Well, she basically wrote about it, right, to convince people that this needs to stop, right? It just has to stop. And you can imagine in the South, right, that this book was not received well. In fact, it was banned. Some cases it was burned, right? And many Southerners called it just propaganda, right? Northern propaganda. It's full of lies, but it wasn't, right? These things that she writes about in her book actually happened on plantations, right? The whippings, the rapes, the abuse, the verbal and physical abuse, right? She writes about it. And her book, right, it's a great book. I recommend you read it. Everyone should read it, but it's going to continue even more and amplify the continuing divide between the North and the South even more, right? Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher in 1852. Okay, and that's the notes, guys, okay? Make sure you copy down all the bold bullet points, okay? On these slides, remember, check the class page. You have an open note quiz that's due tomorrow morning, or I should say Tuesday morning, right? By 10 a.m., take the quiz. Use your notes if you want to. It's open note. Just don't forget to take it, because after the deadline, the quiz is going to lock, right? And to take it, if you don't take it in time, you're going to have to email me, have to reopen it, and you're going to lose 10 percentage points for it being late, right? So take your notes, right? Save them, and then take the quiz immediately, right? It's open note, okay? Don't forget to turn in any missing assignments you might have, specifically the chapter 12 and chapter 13 vocabulary, or if you have any missing assignments from last week or previous weeks. Okay, please get them in. Have a good Thanksgiving and stay safe, okay? Make sure you guys stay safe. Take care, guys.